Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann. I almost started filming with my mic turned off, but I figured it out. Go me. So today I want to talk about Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I'm going to try to make the first part spoiler free, and then I am going to go spoilery, and I will signal very clearly when I'm about to switch to spoilers. And also I will do timestamps down below. So if you've already read this and don't need the brief synopsis, etc., and just want to hear the spoilers, go click on that timestamp below, because I'm going to do the very annoying thing of poking at some of the plot holes in a thriller. And of course, thrillers have plot holes. Anyway, so spoiler free. So Home Before Dark is a thriller, and it's a thriller that maybe has some supernatural elements. So it's a very creepy thriller, and this is a genre that I don't typically read, but I want to try new genres. That's part of the fun of being on BookTube is discovering books that you wouldn't normally pick up just for yourself. And Riley Sager is a bit of a BookTube darling, and this book in particular, which came out last year in 2020, is a BookTube darling and was getting lots of good reviews. And I did really enjoy this. This was a very fun read. It was very creepy, especially in the beginning. I started reading it at night, which was dumb. The reason that I don't typically read thrillers is because the world is kind of scary a lot of the time anyway, and I don't really want to be scared in my house. So, reading a creepy, supernatural-ish book where the action takes place in a creepy haunted house, starting that at night when the author is really building up the creepy factor, was maybe not the best decision. But it was good. It was creepy. So the cool gimmick in this book is that it's a dual timeline book, and there's a book within a book. So we follow two narrators. One is named Ewan Holt, and he wrote a book called House of Horrors, which is set 25 years before the action in the contemporary timeline, in which the narrator is his daughter, Maggie Holt. And in the historical timeline 25 years ago, Ewan Holt and his daughter Maggie, who is 5 in that historical timeline, and his wife Jess have bought a creepy, large Victorian haunted house that has a history of some murders and accidental deaths in the house and stories about supernatural phenomena. And so they buy the house, but they only live there for a total of 20 days. And the House of Horrors book that he wrote is the story of what happened during those 20 days. And they eventually left the house sort of like afraid for their lives from these supernatural goings on. And his book became a hit bestseller, sort of set the financial future for him and his family. And then in the contemporary timeline, he has just died prior to the beginning of the book. And his daughter, Maggie, in a sort of surprise to her twist, and this is underlying the whole plot, so it's not a spoiler to say that she has inherited Baneberry Hall, this haunted house where her family lived for 20 days. And she is absolutely shocked to hear that her family still owns it. She had no idea, and also shocked that her father left it to her in his will. And then on his deathbed, he also says, "Promise me you'll never go back there. It's not safe for you." So Maggie, being a strong 30-year-old woman of the 21st century, decides, screw this, I'm going to go face my family's ghosts and take this decrepit old mansion and flip it. And she's an interior designer and carpenter, I guess, or something. Anyway, she actually runs her own company doing house flipping and renovation. So she's the perfect person to take on this task. She also has something to prove, because the publication of this sensational House of Horrors book about her family's experience in this haunted house shaped her entire childhood. As a 5-year-old, she was drawn along the interview circuit. She was always like that weird kid who was the victim of ghost violence, etc. And she has no memory of any of the events that happened in that book. So and of course, who believes in ghosts, right? So she's convinced the entire book is a pack of lies that her parents made up to make money, and has always felt betrayed by them because they would never admit that to her. They always refused to talk about the book and maintained, her dad would say everything in that book is true and we're not going to talk about it. So she wants to sort of go back, prove to herself and prove to the world that the book is a pack of lies, and flip this house and sell it and just get it out of her life. So it's a thriller, so things do not go as Maggie plans when she gets to Baneberry Hall. So that is the essentially the spoiler-free version. I mean, it's a really cool premise. The dual timeline is really cool, and Maggie Holt is a fun character as a main character, and it's creepy and fun and definitely kept me on the edge of my seat. So now, I'm going to switch to spoilers. So, all of that said, good book. But it's not a perfect book. I mean, very few books are a perfect book, so that's no surprise. So as much as I enjoyed it, there were several times where I got pulled out of the story just because um, I wasn't super convinced that the characters were being sort of true to themselves as characters, if that makes sense. And plot holes where it's like, really, that's sort of unbelievable. And being a nitpicky, judgmental person, I'm going to go through some of those things. So first of all, in the very, very beginning of the book, as the early chapters of this House of Horrors book that tells about this family's experience with the house, which is inside this book, we're told about the first time that Ewan and Jess toured the house with a realtor and why they decided to buy the house. And it just really was not believable to me that they bought the house in the first place. Like, within the story, consistent for the characters, it wasn't really believable why they bought the house. It was mostly believable for Ewan, the main guy, but it was really not believable to me why his wife went along with it. And you could sort of see a few things that the author sort of felt like were inserted to try to make it more believable, but it just didn't quite work. And it becomes a little bit relevant later on because Ewan and Jess do get divorced after this whole process for a number of reasons, but you can see the fractures within them happening within that House of Horrors book that he eventually writes. So at one point, she claims that she tried to talk him out of the house and that he debated and cajoled, and so there wasn't any point, and so she just went along with it, but she actually hates the house, and that's actually not really how those early chapters were written. So there was a bit of that was a bit of a disconnect. Then the other thing is, one of the main premises for explaining the actions of Ewan and Jess and why they held on to the house after all the supernatural stuff and they fled in the middle of the night afraid for their lives, etc. The whole premise is that they were doing everything they could to keep their daughter safe, to keep Maggie safe. So the backstory there, and these are major spoilers, is that a teenager who had been babysitting Maggie on the night that all the shit hit the fan dies an accidental death in the house, and the parents weren't there. They were out on a date. And when they get back, it appears that the teenager and Maggie, the 5-year-old, were fighting, and the teenager fell down the stairs and died accidentally. And so the parents panic, and of course they want to protect their daughter, and so they hide the body in the house. And so that's why they've held on to this house. That's why they wove this whole supernatural ghost story around it, so that people wouldn't check and stuff. But anyway, so they've sort of held on to the house to make sure that body wouldn't be discovered. But it's just like, they don't tell her that they still own the house. And so it's just a surprise when it's in the will. And the dad saying it's not safe for you to go back. And her mom says the same thing. Once the dad dies, the mom is like, because they're divorced, the mom is like, I'll buy the house from you. Just don't go there. There's no reason for you to go there. And it's all just like, this is very weird. This is not how I would act as a parent if my whole goal was to keep my child safe. And granted, people don't always behave rationally, I guess, when they're terrified, and I probably won't either, but I was like, this is just a little hard to believe. Like, not telling her that she's inheriting the house and making up some reason. Like, you've got 25 years, you couldn't come up with a reason to tell her about keeping the house and that she needs to keep it forever. Like, it was just not quite believable. Then the other thing is that they're holding on to this house for 25 years because there's a dead body in it. And I'm like, hello, once all that flesh disintegrates, it's not that hard to get rid of bones. I mean, I know we've got all these mystery novels and thrillers and everything where like people find the bones and whatever, and that does happen in this book, but it's like somebody is gonna find bones if they're under the kitchen or under the living room floor, in the kitchen ceiling, the way this house is set up. It's like, of course those were going to get found someday. Like, this is really idiotic thinking. The other thing about the body hidden in the ceiling is that dead bodies are stinky, especially a body the size of a 16-year-old. Like, that is gonna reek for months. And there's a groundskeeper wandering around and a housekeeper wandering around. And so like we're supposed to believe that after this family left in the middle of the night, nobody entered that house for like a year and a half. Also, like all the juices of this decaying body, like it was literally just shoved under the floorboards in a canvas sack. Like, you're gonna tell me there wasn't ceiling damage from the juice? Like, it's just like this is not quite right. Like, you'd be able to smell a dead body from the outside of a 200-year-old or whatever Victorian house if you're the groundskeeper doing the maintenance. Like, what? But the other thing that bothered me is this is like a well-known house and this is a tiny town. And in both timelines, when Ewan is there and when Maggie is there, they're trying to figure out the history of this house. And they're like, okay, well, maybe I should talk to the police, or maybe I should talk to this one woman who used to live here, but I don't want to like make anybody pissed off or whatever. And so they kind of like try to do it, but it never occurs to them to talk to anybody else. And I'm like, this is a tiny town in Vermont that like sounds like it doesn't have a stoplight. It has one sort of cheap motel. Like you could probably walk into any business establishment and say, hey, tell me about the haunted house on the hill. And everybody would be like, oh, let me tell you about the 6 murders that have happened here over the past 150 years. But they're like all sneaky and detective-y about it. And like, I gotta get to the truth. And it's like, just go ask the neighbor 2 doors down, since the neighbor 1 door down won't tell you anything. Like, it's not hard. And especially in Maggie's timeline, it's like you've got Google. Your dad published an international bestseller about this house that has now been sort of like a tourist attraction with people trying to break into the grounds. And you go through the physical archives of the local newspaper instead of going to the Wikipedia page about it. Like, it was just like, come on, people, use technology. And then, okay, one other thing. So the teenager who died and whose body is stuffed in the house, she ran away and like was reported to the police as a runaway and everything on the exact same night that this family fled this house and also talked to the police about supernatural goings on. And only one police person put it together and was like, maybe this house and maybe these people with whom this disappeared teenager had a known association and now they're leaving town. Like maybe there's a connection. And then the cop didn't follow through on it for 25 years. And that's addressed a little bit. Like she was a rookie cop at the time. She was a woman. Now she's police chief in the modern timeline and can finally like figure it out. But it's just like, you're telling me that a teenager disappeared on the same night that a family fled town, supposedly in fear for their lives from ghosts, published an international bestseller about it, continued to own the house and not let anybody in it, and nobody thought to check the house for the teenager's body. The teenager who was known to hang out with the family and babysit occasionally. Like, what? Okay, and then one final thing. One of the like scary dramatic moments in the book, perhaps the most scary dramatic moment before the big showdown at the end, is when they're doing oh yeah, the guy Ewan is in the kitchen. This is in the older timeline, and like creepy stuff is happening, and then the whole kitchen ceiling falls in because there's a nest of snakes. That just like falls down on the table, and it's, you know, this horrible thing, and the snakes are chasing him and like yada yada yada. And that sets the stage because then there's these ceiling repairs that happened, and in the course of that they realize there's all this space, there's enough space for a body, right? But I was just like, snakes? Really? In Vermont? There are no venomous snakes in Vermont? Like, snakes? Really? Like, as a biologist, I'm just like, could we not? Like, snakes do not deserve the bad reputation that they have. And like, yeah, I wouldn't want a nest under my floorboards in between my living room and my kitchen. Nobody wants that, but it's also just like, it happens in an old house. It's just snakes. I don't know. So I was like, come on. So anyway, I'm talking way too long. Those are all of my things that like drew me out of the story. This book was really fun. If you are into thrillers, if you don't mind a bit of a supernatural creepiness. Another huge spoiler is that at the end of the book, it's all pretty convincingly revealed to have been real people who are doing all of these supposedly supernatural things. It sort of all hangs together. There's a few things that aren't sort of explained well, but that's okay. But yeah, so it was a fun thriller, and I'm really glad I read it, but I also like just couldn't help myself, like those moments that I was pulled out of the story, just being like, there's got to be a Wikipedia page about this internationally famous haunted house. Like, you do not have to go to the physical newspaper archives in the basement to get stories about the murders and accidental deaths that happened here. Like, anyway, okay. Rant over. Thank you for watching if you watched this far, and I will see you all in the next video.